The laughter started before she even reached the front of the formation. Private Emily Carter stood perfectly still while a few recruits exchanged mocking glances. Too quiet, one whispered. She'll never survive real combat. Another muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. She kept her eyes forward, refusing to answer. But behind her calm expression was a woman carrying memories no one there could imagine, and a secret stitched into the lining of her old duffel bag. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing who's listening. The training ground buzzed with noise, boots striking gravel beneath the morning sun. Dust drifted through the cool air as instructors barked orders across the field. Emily blended into the ranks, speaking only when required. To everyone else, silence looked like weakness. They never noticed the tiny scar across her wrist, the careful way she scanned every rooftop, or how every loud explosion made her eyes narrow instead of panic. The jokes grew louder with each passing day. Some recruits hid her equipment. Others laughed whenever she struggled to lift heavier gear, convinced she had slipped into the military by mistake. She could have answered every insult. She chose not to. There was a promise she intended to keep, a promise made beside a battlefield where someone else's life had mattered more than her own. Even Sergeant Mason began to doubt her. He watched her with disappointment, believing courage always arrived with confidence. He was wrong. Everything changed during the final combat exercise. A simulated village stretched across the training grounds, abandoned buildings casting long shadows over broken streets. Smoke drifted through shattered windows while alarms echoed in the distance. The recruits rushed forward in confusion, shouting over one another as the mission began to unravel. Then disaster struck. One of the training structures partially collapsed after an unexpected equipment failure. Heavy beams crashed to the ground. Thick dust swallowed the entrance. Panic spread instantly. Recruits froze. Instructors yelled conflicting commands. Emily didn't hesitate. She moved with astonishing precision, reading the danger before anyone else could. Her voice, silent for weeks, became calm and unmistakably clear. She directed frightened recruits away from unstable walls, organized a rescue line, and crawled through a narrow opening without waiting for permission. The crowd watched in stunned silence. Inside the wreckage, every breath tasted of concrete dust. Broken metal groaned above her head while trapped soldiers called for help. Emily found the injured recruit first, shielding him as debris shifted overhead. Outside, others followed every instruction she gave. Together, they lifted beams in perfect rhythm, their combined strength moving like a single tide, determined to save lives. Minutes later, she emerged carrying the wounded recruit across her shoulders. The training ground erupted into applause. Sergeant Mason stared at her with disbelief. The same recruits who had mocked her could barely meet her eyes. That should have been the end. But fate had one more surprise waiting. As the senior command arrived to investigate the accident, an elderly general stepped out of the command vehicle. His sharp eyes swept across the formation before suddenly stopping on Emily. For a long moment, he simply stared. Then he noticed something tucked inside her identification folder. A worn combat medal. His expression changed instantly. With hands that trembled ever so slightly, he held up the medal for everyone to see. It was awarded years earlier during a classified overseas rescue mission, one that had saved dozens of soldiers under impossible circumstances. Emily had never spoken about it because the recognition had never belonged to her alone. Several teammates had never made it home, and she refused to celebrate what had cost them everything. The general stepped forward and saluted. Every soldier on the field followed. The silence that filled the air carried more respect than applause ever could. Many of those who had laughed at Emily wanted to apologize, but words suddenly felt too small. They had judged a person by her quietness instead of her character. They had mistaken humility for fear. Emily accepted their apologies with a gentle smile, not because they deserved forgiveness, but because bitterness would only dishonor the people whose courage had shaped her own. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the training ground looked different. The dust settled. The whispers disappeared, and somewhere between the fading light and the quiet wind, every recruit learned that true strength rarely announces itself. Because courage doesn't need to be loud. It simply shows up when everyone else steps back, just as the quietest soldier became the one no one would ever forget. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe quiet courage deserves to be remembered, subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable stories that remind us humanity is strongest when compassion leads the way. The next story may change the way you see someone forever.